Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. His founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Jagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Givi Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Gangamaya Ki Jai. Shri Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol Shamaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Narayanam Namaskrityam Namam Chaivam Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraят Nastaparayeshu Abhadareshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 6th chapter, text 37. Maham nayuyam yad ritam gatim vidur. Navamadeva kimuparate suraha. Namayaya mukhita buddhaya tvedam. Nimirmitam chatma sumam vichakshame. Aham chayayam yadritam gatim vidur. Vamadeva kimupauri suraha. Tadmayaya mohita buddhayastvidam. Vinirmitam chatma sumam vichakshame. Word for word. Na, neither. Aham, I. Yuyam, all you sons. Yet, whose? Ritam, factual. Gatim, movements. Vidu, do know. Na, nor. Vamadevaha, Lord Shiva. Kim, what? Uta, else. Apare, others. Suraha, demigods. Tat, by his. Mayaya, by the illusory energy. Mohita, bewildered. Buddhayaha, with such intelligence. To, but. Idam, this. Vinirmitam, what is created. Cha, also. Atmasamam, by dint of one's personal ability. Vichakshame, observe. Since neither Lord Shiva nor you nor I could ascertain the limits of spiritual happiness, how can other demigods know it? And because all of us are bewildered by the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord, we can see only this manifested cosmos according to our individual ability. Responsibly. Since neither Lord Shiva nor you, nor I, could ascertain the limits of spiritual happiness, how can other demigods know it? And because all of us are bewildered by the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord, we can see only this manifested cosmos according to our individual ability. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. We have many times mentioned the names of 12 selected authorities, Dvadasa Mahajan, of which Brahma, Narada, and Lord Shiva head the list as the first, second, and third in order of merit of those who know something of the Supreme Lord. Other demigods, semi-demigods, Gandharvas, Charanas, Vidyadharas, human beings or asuras, cannot possibly know fully about the potencies of the Absolute Lord, Sri Krishna. The demigods, semi-demigods, Gandharvas, etc., are all highly intelligent persons in the upper planets. The human beings are inhabitants of the intermediate planets, and the asuras are inhabitants of the lower planets. All of them have their respective conceptions and estimations of the absolute truth, as does the scientist or the empiric philosopher in human society. All such living entities are creatures of the material nature, and consequently they are bewildered by the wonderful display of the three modes of material nature. Such bewilderment is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita 7.13. Tribir Gunamayar Bhavayar Ab Sarvam Idam Jagat. Every living entity, beginning from Brahma down to the ant, is individually bewildered by the three modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. Everyone thinks in terms of individual capacity, that this universe, which is manifested before us, is all in all. And so the scientist in the human society of the 20th century calculates the beginning and end of the universe in his own way. But what can the scientists know? Even Brahma himself was once bewildered, thinking himself the only one Brahma favored by the Lord. But later on, by the grace of the Lord, he came to know that there are innumerable more powerful Brahmas as well, in far bigger universes beyond this universe. And all of these universes combined together form Ekapad Vibhuti, or 1/4 of the manifestation of the Lord's creative energy. The other 3/4 of his energy are displayed in the spiritual world. And so what can the tiny scientist with a tiny brain know of the absolute personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna? The Lord says, therefore, Mohitam nabijananti mam ebhyaha param avyayam. Bewildered by such modes of material nature, they cannot understand that beyond these manifestations is a supreme person who is the absolute controller of everything. Brahma, Narada, and Lord Shiva know about the Lord to a considerable extent, and therefore one should follow the instructions of these great personalities instead of being satisfied with a tiny brain and its playful discoveries, such as spacecraft and similar products of science. As the mother is the only authority to identify the father of a child, so the mother, Vedas, presented by the recognized authority such as Brahma, Narada, or Shiva, is the only authority to inform us about the absolute truth. The verse again, since neither Lord Shiva nor you nor I could ascertain the limits of spiritual happiness, how can other demigods know it? And because all of us are bewildered by the illusory external energy of the Supreme Lord, we can see only this manifested cosmos according to our individual ability. Mukam karoti vachalam pangam longaya tegirim yatkripat tarham bande Shri Guru Dinatarane. This is a very important verse in the sense that even the greatest of the Mahajans, Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, and others, and Narada, are unable to fully know the extent of Krishna. Sometimes they think they do, and sometimes they become a little bit bewildered as to how powerful Krishna actually is. There's a famous incident called the Brahma Mohana Leela, where Brahma decides to test Krishna and see if he's really powerful. He kidnaps his young friends and his calves, and he realizes that actually it's impossible to do anything to bewilder Krishna. At the end, it's called Brahma Mohana Leela because Lord Brahma is bewildered. He's completely understanding what the actual situation is. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness is so complex that even the greatest of the Mahajans don't understand it. And as it is said, Yastvindra Gopam Atabendram Aho Bakarma in Brahma Samhita, that everyone, from Brahma down to the Indragopa germ, it's a sort of microscopic creature, Indragopa, no one completely understands Krishna. And they can only understand him if they're infused with a sense of love of God, or with, as the verse says in Brahma Samhita, with the salve of love. If the eyes are infused with that, then they can see Krishna. Krishna cannot be understood any other way except through his mercy and through love of Krishna, not by speculation. So even these greatest of the great personalities like Lord Shiva don't completely understand Krishna, and therefore Prabhupada has said that all these great personalities, including Krishna and Lord Chaitanya himself, very often, always, not very often, but always referred to various Puranas and Vedic literatures to ascertain the absolute truth. They wanted to comply with the standard convention that you can't invent the truth, that it has to be supported shastrically, it has to be supported by the great Mahajans, Guru Shastra and Sadhu. Just as in the U.S. they have a three-way system of checks, what they call checks and balances. There's the legislature, there's the executive, and then there's the courts, or the what do they call it? There's a branch of knowledge called judiciary. So between judiciary and executive and legislative, they have to adhere to these three checks. So similarly, and that's a gross example, in Vedic literature, the greatest of the great have to quote from Vedic literature. And Krishna and even Lord Chaitanya and others did it just because they wanted to show that this has to be done always, that there has to be reference to the Vedas. They can't just invent something. So it's a sort of three-way check on things. There's it's important because to understand the philosophy, because at the beginning there's a lot of what we might call glitter in Krishna consciousness. There's an expression, I think it's a U.S. expression, that all that glitters is not gold. Do they have that in Australia too? Yeah, it's a fairly well-known English language expression. And Krishna consciousness is very glittery in the sense that the food is good, the people are nice, the place is clean, there's a lot of singing and dancing, and in some places like this, there's a good climate and good atmosphere. But after a while, all the glitter begins to wear off, and we encounter what we'll call obstacles. There was a book written by the late Purnachandra in about 2000, about 21 years ago, called Unspoken Obstacles on the Path to Bhakti. And in it, I've reordered it because I want to read it again. He talks about what happens, what are obstacles? And like in a court of law, sometimes the defendant who murdered somebody, for example, says, "Oh, Jesus made me do it." And then there's the insanity plea. Sometimes the expert civil surgeon is called, the psychiatrist is called to give witness. Was he actually crazy when he murdered, or what? And of course nowadays it's a very common thing that the insanity plea is invoked, and actual murderers are allowed to walk freely after a short stint in prison. It's actually very dangerous. And it so happens that the laws of Manu say that anyone who follows the laws of transmigration of the soul know that the death penalty is actually beneficial to the murderer, because in a future birth it absolves the person of the serious crime that he may commit, and in a future birth he starts anew with a clean slate, so to speak. So that's part of what happens. Prabhupada was very critical of scientists, as is kind of referred to in this purport, that they didn't know everything. And the temple that's being built in Mayapur, the temple of the Vedic planetarium, is a testimony to this. It's not just a temple, but it's a planetarium. It's a temple. At the same time, it's a teaching institution. And its teaching is one of the central features, this chandelier, which talks about the structure of the universe. And I may not be quoting him exactly, but the late Sariputta said something to the effect that if we don't understand the structure of the universe, we can't understand Vedic literature. I don't know if those are exact words, and I probably don't agree with those exact words, but he said something to that effect. So that it's not, like I said, it's not just a temple, but it's a scientific device, and the structure of the whole scientific establishment is very bewildering. It was thought at one time that all the planets revolved around the Earth, the geocentric concept, and then along came, I think it was Copernicus, the Polish astronomer, and he supposedly established that actually that's not true. What really happens is that the planets all revolve around the sun. And the Vedic structure of the universe has its own kind of structural dimensions that nobody completely understands. I think even Prabhupada in about 1977, something like October or September of 1977, tried to get a number of people to present to him their drawings of the structure of the universe, and none of them were to his satisfaction. And he even admitted that if you go in the western direction, say from Los Angeles to Calcutta, it's a longer period. And he said once that he traveled once by airplane from Paris to Los Angeles, and it's like an 8-hour journey, but by the airplane time, or by the time in the air, it's only 3 or 4 hours. So there's a very subtle difference between the higher and the lower planetary systems that the scientists have not realized. So no one was able, even though many people came before Prabhupada with different ideas about the structure of the universe, how it could be possible to go in the western direction and not ever see the sunset. And people that work in airplanes call it chasing the sun. Chasing the sun. And the idea is if you continue to go in that direction, most airplanes can't do it for very long, or 12 or 13 hours at the most, the sun never actually sets. But we know that the sun does set. It sets here, it sets everywhere, it sets on the earth. But if you go above the earth, it's a whole different dimension. And if you go the other way, it's a shorter time. So because many of us have traveled in airplanes, we know what it's like. It's just very, very mysterious. So he tried to get people to draw what the structure of the universe was, but no one was completely none of the drawings were completely satisfactory to him. It's a very complex thing, and this what's being made in this temple of the planetarium is a chandelier. It's so large that it can't enter in through any of the doorways of the building. It has to be constructed inside, or the latest idea is to make it modular, to to insert it piece by piece, about 9 or 10 pieces, and then put them all together, and then they can hang from the top, and they can be very large. The whole structure can be so large that it can't be entered in whole in through any doorway. So that's underway, and they say there's going to be a grand opening in 2022 or something like that. But I think the biggest part of the grand opening will be that it'll be used as a temple, and the devotees will be able to go in there and worship the deities. There will be deities. There's a deity of Prabhupada, and there's deities of Panchatattva, and deities of I mean, it's a temple, but it's also, as Prabhupada mentioned, a planetarium, which is a kind of scientific term. So it's not exactly heliocentric like Copernicus posited. It's not exactly geocentric like people supposedly thought that it was like that. But there is, Sadhuputta has made a model of the universe that shows the Earth being the center with all the planets going around it. And they don't go around in circles, they go around in sort of curlicues. But it's possible to see that kind of thing. It's very difficult for ordinary people, plebeians like me, to understand. But it's there to teach people. It's one of the unfinished works of the Krishna consciousness movement, that there is Krishna, but there's also the universe itself. And it's explained to a degree in the 5th canto, but it's also very difficult to understand. And word has it may be just prajalpa, I'm not really sure, that some of the 5th canto is going to be revised because it's sort of incomplete and understandable to the common reader. Yet it's there. It's there in the Bhagavatam. And I think in the Bhagavatam, this is my theory, that many people, but we have to read these Sanskrit verses, and we don't even know most of the time what the words mean. But my theory is that Prabhupada wanted us to learn what a lot of the words were, even not only the words, but the grammar of the language, which can take, say, 10 years to learn, even studying 8 hours a day. Not only prose, but the poetry, and it's all very rigorous. It's more difficult than Greek, it's more difficult than Latin, much more difficult than English. But Prabhupada wanted us to learn a lot of these words, this is my theory, because some of them don't translate very well. He even said that the word rasa doesn't translate well. It's a very peculiar rasa, very peculiar Sanskrit word. It means mellow, it means taste, it means relationship, but none of those things are exactly what it means. It means something that's untranslatable into any other language, especially English, which is what Prabhupada did. He translated Sanskrit into English. It's very interesting that in the offerings in the Vyasa Puja book, that one of the first offerings is one by Anuttama, who claims that there is glitter. I mean, at first the Krishna consciousness movement is very attractive because of the cleanliness, because of the friendliness, because of the food, because of the singing and dancing. But he mentioned a few other things too that begin to wear off, and that are sometimes deceitfully alluring. And one of them was that people can give very, what he called, charismatic classes. And people think that that's the absolute truth, but it's sometimes not. Very often it's not. And because people are attached to a certain personality, it becomes cultish, and they think that it's absolutely true always. It may not even be something that refers to Vedic literature. And in an earlier part of that book, Prabhupada talks about a verse from Kathopanishad. Talks about Krishna consciousness being a razor's edge. Now that sounds kind of harsh and extreme. That Krishna it's a system of recreation in a way, because there's a lot of singing and dancing. But another way, according to Kathopanishad, it's a razor's edge. That Maya is very strong. And if we take one step towards Krishna, as I said recently to one devotee, Maya takes one step towards us. And it's a very, very delicate and difficult path to follow. And that's why it's sometimes called razor's edge, or it's full of obstacles along the way. I think the razor's edge is a good analogy, because if one makes a tiny aberration or slip when shaving with a razor, there's an incision, a cut, and blood starts to flow. So it is actually a razor's edge to be fully Krishna conscious. To understand, it's a very complex philosophy, And as we have heard many times, that people throughout the world don't believe in the concept of transmigration of the soul. Once that's like the first step. And once that is acceptable, a lot of people dream about it and they think about it. There's kind of a New Age version and a Hollywood version of reincarnation, that you're always going to be born as a human being, or you are a famous person in your last life, or you're going to be a very successful in your future life. That's the sort of a New Age version of reincarnation. But it's actually much more complex than that. Transmigration of the soul. You can be reborn as an insect. You can be reborn as a demigod or a plant or just about anything. It's a very complicated procedure. One of the things that brought this into sharp focus was an engagement that I had at a Catholic school, and a few devotees and I went to this school south of Los Angeles. It's called Mary Mother of the Sea, and it was full of priests and nuns. Everyone wanted to find out what the Hare Krishnas were all about, and there were probably about 35 or 40 people in the classroom, and about 10 of them were teachers. They were either priests or nuns or whatever, and at the end of the class, one of the priests, who was a youngish kind of guy in his early 30s or late 20s, said, "I'd like to talk with you privately in my chambers." And we did that, and he said that the thing that bothers him the most was that people come to him to hear, for him to hear their confessions. And the same people come week after week confessing to the same sins. And he said, "What's your theory about this? What's the use of confession if they still continue to commit the same sins?" And so we told him in our best way about atonement not being possible if one doesn't remove the sinful desires from the heart. Anyway, we tried to give him that. We quoted the verses, and we said that's our interpretation of why. And I think he liked that explanation, because it's not really there in a lot of spiritual philosophies, especially not his. It wasn't there, at least in his mind. It wasn't there. He may have had a warped version of Christianity. I don't know. But at the end of the session in his chambers, he gave us a sealed envelope. And on the way back to Los Angeles, we thought, well, let's open the envelope and see what's inside. And there was a $50 bill, U.S. Banknote of $50, and we deduced that it was from his own private, personal money. And he enjoyed so much what we said and our presentation that he gave us that much money out of his own pocket, so to speak. So it just goes to show that the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is a very important and very complex thing, and that people don't understand that there is such a thing as transmigration of the soul. It's not understood in any not thoroughly anyway, in any religious philosophy or in any university anywhere in the world. So that's the very, very first thing. And one thing I noticed in my first early travels to that part of the world, the Asian subcontinent or India, was that almost everybody believes that there is something to this philosophy of transmigration. Maybe it's not a huge population, but it's like the second biggest country in the world according to population figures. And it was very inspiring to see that many people believing in it. And it was a very unusual thing for a Westerner to encounter, that maybe we're not the body, that the soul can be reincarnated birth after birth. Anyway, we have to stop now. We're running out of time. But if you have any points or of discussion or things to ask, I'll try to make this a little bit interactive. Yes? Anybody? Okay, I think we'll stop then. Yes, you wanted to say something?
You find that in modern times a lot of people are believing in reincarnation, but they don't understand how that process really takes place. You can maybe elucidate on what's happening. They might say, I might want to come back as a fish or a whale or something, but they don't understand actually how that's happening.
I think that's true. I mean, a lot of people think that they're famous singers or musicians, that they were Wolfgang Mozart in past life, or somebody like that, one of these great composers or instrumentalists. But that, again, as I said, is kind of not a proper understanding. And it's very attractive to think that I'm going to get reborn, that that I'm going to go to heaven after this life. They have all kinds of weird ideas about what it might be. People who believe in life after death, they have all kinds of strange ideas about what it means. And most of the New Age philosophies that I have encountered are that people think they're going to come back as a human being and of a higher nature. And I know that can happen occasionally, but because people are so sinful, they won't. They're not likely to come back in a better situation. They're likely to come back in a worse situation. It's like Prabhupada has told us that a person who is like a prime minister, for example, of a country, may think that he's going to be a prime minister. And if he can be born in his own country or her own country, that's the best thing. But that birth can be as an insect. It doesn't necessarily have to be as a human being, an insect in that country. So that's what reincarnation, or transmigration, is all about. It's not a simple thing. And you can't just invent what it's going to be. You have to refer to books of knowledge, standard books of knowledge, that is.
Yeah, how is that person going from that body to that body?
How?
Yes.
Well, that's a little controversial, how it happens. The process. Some people say it happens instantaneously, and other people say there's a time lapse between the time you die or leave this body and the time you get born in another body. There's even a ritual amongst some people that there's a place called Gaia, and if you go there and perform certain rituals, you free your ancestors from disembodied states, which indicates that maybe people can be disembodied for a period of time anyway. They won't have a material body. There's a theory that in a ghostly body, that if a person commits suicide, I think it's part of the Krishna consciousness, part of the Christian philosophy too, that if you commit suicide, you become a ghost, which is considered a very unpleasant situation, because you have desires, but no body to fulfill them. That's the reason why there are cases of possession that happen sometimes, and it's pretty spooky. Anyway, I don't think it's going to happen to you. Any others? Okay, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.